We have two panels today that we're bringing you. One is the Division of Academic Affairs Student Services panel, and then a little bit later we have the Division of Student Affairs Student Services panel. So our focus today on supporting student success is bringing to you really all the people who provide resources for our students and who work very closely with the faculty at all different times of the year to be sure that we can support student success as well as we possibly can. That's why we're all here. Division of Academic Affairs and Division of Student Affairs have merged closely together within the last couple of years. There's been a slight restructuring within the institution where Student Affairs is now a part of Academic Affairs, which is an unusual structure for higher education, but something that is really innovative and fosters collaboration and communication across these divisions. So it's a very deliberate decision that was made by the administration here to be sure that we are able to stay in very close touch with the people who are working so closely to help our students. So it's in that vein that I'd like to introduce this first panel of the day, Division of Academic Affairs Student Services panel, and they'll introduce themselves and then we'll take questions from you. And then they can talk a little bit more about their centers after that. But they're going to give you a brief introduction so you have an idea of what each of them does for the university. Elisa?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Probably pull it over.
My name is Elisa Newman. I'm the Director for Athletic Academic Achievement at Towson, and I'm also the Athletic Academic Advisor for football and women's golf.
Good morning. My name is Eric Welkos. I am with the Academic Advising Center. We register all of the incoming freshmen for classes. I personally coordinate the advising for our incoming transfer students. For the entire class of incoming transfer students, we work with undecided students as well, and then we work with students on intervention. So that'll be academic renewal, academic warning, and that kind of thing.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Arnold Garza, and I'm Assistant University Librarian for Access Services in the library. So that's the department that does all of the circulation, course reserves, and interlibrary loan. I'm also the liaison for political science, international studies, metropolitan studies, law and American civilization, and I think that's all of them. So all of you do have liaison librarians that work directly with your department or program in a subject-specific way. And of course, we provide resources for research, getting work done in the library, tools and spaces, and other stuff that will enrich them.
Good morning. I'm Liz Scarborough from the Tutoring and Learning Center, also in the library. We provide peer academic support in subject areas of content. We have 5 coordinators. In each of the areas, we have one for math, one for science, one for music, one for business and liberal arts, and one for computer science. And they supervise the tutors that we train. We also have supplemental instruction, and we have workshops on academic skills for students, academic coaching where they can meet individually to get some assistance. And we're located on the 5th floor of the library. We really look forward to partnering with you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Wayne Robertson. I'm the Writing Center Director here at Towson. We have a pretty vibrant writing center at Towson. So even during the pandemic, we had just about 12,000 writing center appointments last year, for example. That's slightly down from about 14 or so usually. We have a graduate writing center. We work with students all the way up to PhD dissertations. We also have faculty resources that we provide. So we have a paid summer retreat, for example, about the teaching of writing. You can also contact my colleague, Maureen Barney, who will actually sit down with you one-on-one to go over, for example, lesson plans, or if you're worried about an assignment, or even if you have a case of plagiarism that you're kind of like, this is a really iffy kind of situation, you want some advice.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Gail Gibbs. I'm the director of the International Student and Scholar Office. That means I work primarily with our international student population who are here specifically on a student visa. I think if there's just a couple things that it's important for you to remember is that as international students, they have very specific rules that they have to follow to remain in immigration compliance. That usually translates in the classroom to them needing to be enrolled full-time, which oftentimes, depending on the stage they're in, it might mean not doing as best as they would like to in a class, but not being able to drop that class. We get those issues from you, from your colleagues, a lot throughout the year, and we are happy to work with you, to work with the student, to help them get adjusted and help them ensure, even if it's being creative, that they are able to remain both in academic and immigration compliance. So I too look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions that you have at this time, having heard the introductions? Yes, come on up to the mic if you would.
My name is Katie Brewer. I'm with the Department of Nursing. I had a question for the Writing Center director. You mentioned the faculty resources that help with writing. Do they help at all with publication writing?
For faculty, I mean, sometimes I read people's writing, but we don't have faculty writing center. Yeah.
No, I was just curious about the services that they provide for faculty. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, we do have faculty writing groups though.
Okay,
So
great.
for instance, if you're working on a publication and you need to basically get both kind of focused and get some feedback, there are faculty writing groups that meet,
Perfect.
I think twice a week oftentimes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And the faculty writing groups are run by Maureen,
Yep.
whom Wayne mentioned before, and they're done in consultation with Facet as well, and even in our space. So you'll be seeing announcements about the writing groups and what is available there. In addition, Facet is able to support faculty writing through one of our faculty fellows, a research fellow. So if you do have a need of that type, if you're finalizing something for publication or finalizing something you want to submit as a conference presentation, you can just send it to facet@towson.edu, and we'll forward that to our research fellow for review for you. Are there other questions at this point? Okay, I'm going to ask the panelists then to talk about a little bit more about the services you provide, maybe some typical, types of scenarios where you interact with the faculty that will give them an idea what you can provide for them.
So the connection that the Athletic Academic Achievement Office has with the faculty is obviously you might encounter student athletes in your courses throughout the academic year, sometimes even mini-mester or summer, and we are there as a support. So when an incoming freshman comes in as a student athlete, we are their first year experience advisor, or FYE, you might hear those initials. That Academic Advising Center is kind of responsible for distributing all of the incoming students to FYE advisors throughout the different departments, and that might be something that he'll talk about in a second. That is an opportunity for you guys. But once the freshmen move on into their second year, then they get assigned to a departmental or a major advisor within their degree program, in any of the ones that you might be in. And we play a secondary advisor role to them at that point because we are constantly having to track their NCAA academic benchmarks for eligibility purposes. So we have to make sure that they're meeting all of those benchmarks. And we, also track to make sure that they're progressing towards graduation. Some of the services that we provide is study hall. We're open till 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for the student athletes to be able to get their schoolwork done. And we also did have a tutoring program kind of as a supplement to the TLC, but we're actually going to be transitioning away from that just because of budgetary and space issues, as you can imagine. So we're going to be doing a lot of referrals to the TLC, thankfully for them. And we also try to make sure that we are communicating with the professors with travel letters. We send them electronically through our program called, what is it now? Is it SSC, Grades First, Navigate? There's a variation of names that it goes under. But it's a program that you might be using if you're a faculty advisor for a student to document any kind of communication and things like that. But we would be sending our travel letters electronically through that program because it sends you an email of any student athletes that are in your courses that the traveling time schedule might conflict with. But it is also the responsibility of the student athletes to give you guys any kind of documentation at the beginning of the semester to notify you that they are a student athlete and that these are the dates that they might be missing due to their schedule. We also facilitate and help our student athletes who have documented education impacting disorders, whether that's learning disabilities, ADHD, or mental health disorders. And if they get access to accommodations, we try to help facilitate that with ADS, Accessibility and Disability Support Services on campus. And also if a student ends up getting a concussion, a student athlete gets a concussion, that might impact their academic progress in the class somewhat short term, potentially long term, depending on how of a severe injury it was. So we are communicating with you all if a student ends up getting an injury like a concussion, or if they get an injury that needs a surgery and they might end up needing to miss a class or something because of when the doctors can schedule it. So we'll be communicating a lot of, with regards to that. We also send academic progress reports for the student athletes to each of their professors in the middle of the semester. And it is very helpful to get that information just to kind of have a checkup on how they're doing and progressing in your class. If we don't find out until the end of the semester that they've missed like 15 days of class, then we kind of can't help, try to do an intervention at some point earlier to kind of prevent all of that. So the more communication you can provide us, the better we can help light a fire under their butt, because there's expectations that their coaches have for them. And I'm trying to think if there's other things. I'm sorry, that was a lot of information. But if you have other questions, there's we also have advisors that are designated for the individual teams, and it's in your folder of who is assigned to each team. We are in the transition of trying to hire 2 new people, but as of right now, that seems to be like the kind of shakeout of where the sport assignments will be for this upcoming year.
So the Academic Advising Center, as I said, we really work with any type of student you can think of, but primarily I like to think of us as working with FYEs, as we call them, so first year experienced students. Those are essentially just freshmen, transfer students, undecided students, and then students on intervention. So with our freshman students, we, as I said earlier, we actually register every single incoming freshman student, which is a massive task. So summer is very busy for us, probably the busiest time of year. But we are registering every freshman as they come in, as they matriculate. And so we're essentially registering them for a mix of core requirements, which are general education requirements, as well as some of the foundational prerequisites for the major. So hopefully every single freshman will kind of have a good mix of those things. And where the departments get involved is we run the FYE program. So my colleague Emily Halligan works all of that out, and the FYE program is nice because it allows a incoming freshman student to be paired with an advisor, a one-on-one advisor that is specific to their major. So it's a really good first year experience where there's a lot of, I don't want to say hand-holding, but there's a lot of support when it comes to the curriculum. Because obviously high school is significantly different when you're talking about college. The next group that I am very actively involved with is our transferring students. And I find this to be particularly important because transfer students are over 50% of our entire population at Towson University. So just remember that it is very likely that you are going to see mostly transfer students. That is very possible, especially if you're talking about some of the more like upper level courses at times. You will be seeing them because a lot of these students are coming in with associate's degrees, roughly around 60 credits, and so they are coming in brand new. Currently at Towson, we don't have anything quite like the FYE program, nothing as extensive as that for transfer students, but we are constantly working to improve the situation. And this kind of leads me to my academic intervention students. Most of the students on academic warning and academic probation are transfer students. So keep that in mind. The way this will manifest in the classroom really looks something like, we have F grades and we have FX grades. So if you see an FX grade, that means that a student is coming in and they just aren't, or a student has signed up for the class, they just are not attending. So there's a lot of those types of signs. It is tough for transfer students coming in because probably most of them are working, part-time, full-time. To receive the financial aid they need, they often have to be registered for 12 credits at minimum, which is full-time for classes. So imagine if you're receiving full-time, imagine if you are working full-time, but to get the money you need to take courses, you have to work, and you have to take your classes full-time. So it can be a big challenge, and that is exactly the reason why we see most of our ARP, which is Academic Renewal Program and Academic Warning, as transfer students. So keep that in mind. Like I said, 50% of the population, I find it to be particularly important. I'm biased because I coordinate the transfer advising for the university. But it can be a huge challenge, but I think that is one thing to just keep in mind, that a lot of these students are really spread thin. And when possible, we do encourage a first semester transfer to really just kind of, if they can, start part-time just to see how things pan out with them. And then finally, like I said, we work with undecided students. And so hopefully a student who is below 45 credits, that's kind of by the 45 credit range, the student should have an idea of what they want for their major. Once they do reach 45 credits, they're required to do a degree completion plan with departments specifically. So we hope that the student is not undecided as they accumulate more credits, but these things happen. So I have advised a student who had 118 credits and they changed their major completely. So these things happen. But that's why we are here in the Academic Advising Center. Every single college has a liaison in my department. So I am the liaison for Fisher College of Science and Math. And so I welcome any questions via email. I am always supporting Fisher whenever I can. So we have support for everybody.
So as you can imagine, the library and librarian faculty interact with faculty and students in such a wide variety of ways. There's no way I could address the specific need that you might have in detail today. And I think probably one of the most important things to emphasize is within our library faculty, all of you have a library liaison. So there is a librarian who is dedicated to being that conduit for you, that you can reach out with questions. They may not be the person in charge of circulation, but they know, how to answer those questions and how to make the referral to the person who can address your need more specifically. Another way that the faculty rely pretty heavily on the library is to invite librarians into their courses to support students who might be completing a research assignment within your course. So if you are asking students to do any kind of research, hopefully you already know you should not make an assumption about sort of their baseline understandings of how to use the library, how to find credible sources, how to integrate those into their work. We also make lots and lots of referrals for students to the Writing Center. So I would invite you to, as soon as you get the space to do it, reach out to your library liaison. They may already be emailing you. It's something that doesn't give us more thrill than just having a faculty member say, let's work together, let's collaborate on something. So we're super willing to do that. Other ways that we help students with research are, in drop-in contexts. They can walk into the library. We've got a research help desk. We also have virtual services, so they can chat with us online. They can text. They can make appointments if they've gotten that far into their program to understand that there is a liaison librarian. They can meet in person or virtually, with a subject specialist who understands perhaps the specific assignment they've been given, or at least the conventions of the discipline in which they're conducting research. And of course, they have use of our collections, and the collections here at Towson University, of course, are accessible to you, but we also can loan to you the items at all of the libraries across the University System of Maryland. And of course, we've got a robust interlibrary loan program, which all faculty, students, and staff can access for free. So that's something that you should definitely take advantage of. Students can also use our spaces and tools to get their homework done, sort of out. They may not necessarily visualize us as a research center, but as the place where they go to do this stuff. And we've got all of the space and tools that they need for that. So one of the ways that you play a really key role is placing items on course reserve for them, which will help if they cannot necessarily afford textbooks. We cannot buy every single textbook that comes out every year that gets updated, but we do try as much as possible to put textbooks on reserve when the faculty member requests it. And this last year, we did get a special pot of money to place some textbooks on reserve for some of the highest enrolled classes with the most number of sections on campus, again, in order to sort of help with that affordability aspect in students' academic area. They can use our computers, group study spaces, whiteboards, scanners. We have all of those kinds of resources in the building. We can also loan earphones, calculators, and new this year, noise canceling headsets, just for focus purposes. We've had a 24/7 accessible space at the front of the library for a few years now, and this fall we will be expanding that so that the entire third floor, which is the floor that you enter the library on, it's our main floor, will be open 24 hours. So our service desk will close at 10 p.m. and there won't be checkouts happening at 2 a.m., but students can enter the library and use those spaces to get work done. It's something that students are always asking for the library to be open when we're not. And that's, a difficult challenge to meet, but hopefully with this 24-hour third floor, we'll be able to do that. And then finally, earlier, I mentioned stuff to enrich students. So of course, we always have a lot of programming. We try to make things that speak to the needs of students, things like at the end of the semester, we often have therapy dogs come in so that they can come and de-stress with that. But we also do things like we'll be hosting some virtual workshops for citation management, which of course are also open to anyone on campus, including faculty who may need to learn a new software for that purpose, et cetera. We have a special collections in university archives. It's located on the 5th floor. They work closely with a lot of courses, and in some cases you might be surprised the discipline areas that they're able to find really interesting, engaging ways to have students touch primary sources and connect that to course content. So I would encourage you, again, to talk to your library liaison, or even if you're in the library, just walk into their space in the 5th floor. They've got lots of cool stuff on display, and they always like to have visitors. And then the last couple of things that I'll mention just for fun stuff that is, of course, for our students, but also accessible to all of you, are things like popular bestsellers that you can check out from our leisure reading collection, DVDs. We have lots of streaming film databases, mostly academic content, but also some feature films that you might enjoy from home or your office or wherever it is that you're taking a break, and games for students to check out. Thanks.
And also children's books.
Oh yes,
So,
very large children's collection
really
that
wonderful.
you can certainly bring your kids in to touch and use. You can check things out and take them home. That's not limited to just our education students. Thanks.
So before we go to the second half of the panel, does anyone have a question that has been prompted by some of the scenarios that have been shared with you? Yeah, come on up and ask.
How is the security in the library at night? Being open that late, or the students certainly safe in that environment?
Yes. Well, first thing I'll say is, yes, the students are safe. We certainly would not embrace an initiative like this if we weren't confident that students would be safe. This will be the first time that we've had the entire 3rd floor open, so I cannot say exactly what that will look like. But in previous semesters, we always have a security guard on campus until 2 a.m., so that 24/7 space was monitored regularly by an actual human, just coming through every several minutes. The campus police have a full ability to enter that room and check IDs. After 10 p.m., we don't, or really after the service desk closes, the front doors lock and only students can swipe in. So, the actual physical entry to the building is closed. And the last thing that I'll mention is that there are cameras in the library. There are probably cameras all across campus. And so those are things that we can rely on to look back if we need to understand, an incident that was reported overnight or something like that. But we have a record of safety in the library, so it's not a concern for us to open up the rest of the third floor for that. Thank you.
Do you have any further questions at this point for the first half of the panel? Yes.
First, I just want to let people know people are looking for water. It's been delivered, so if somebody really wants water, feel free to get out and get one. Does anybody on the panel need water, or are you all good? All right.
Thank you, Maggie.
I'm okay.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, let's hear from the second half of the panel then, Liz.
Okay. At the Tutoring and Learning Center, we partner with faculty. Sometimes we'll be invited to come and talk about study strategies. Note-taking, time management are really big areas that students often request help with. But if you have something specific, there's a form that you can complete on our site, and we'd be happy to do that. We partner with faculty to find the stellar students who are excellent communicators, who can be our peer tutors. So as you are working with students in your class, identifying students that you might recommend to fill out our form to apply to be a tutor. We are in the business of graduating students, so we are always looking for new students to be tutors. And one of the joys of our job is we work with both the students needing assistance and those who are developing leadership skills. We also receive, students will sometimes come if a faculty member says that they should take advantage of tutoring for their course or come for academic coaching. Just ask the student to verify that they would like for us to share that information with you, and we can provide an email that says the student has come for XYZ service. We'd be happy to facilitate that if that's something you're requesting. I've also had faculty reach out to say, I have a student who's struggling, would you mind sharing your resources with them? And we can send an email inviting them to come to our services. We do send emails to the courses that we're able to support, to the course lists that go directly to the students. We also post in the daily email about tutoring and the services that we provide. There's workshops that students can come to based upon those topics, as I mentioned. But we're always looking for ways to support students. We typically are able to support many 100 and 200 level courses. There are some high areas, for example, math and science, and those are available on a drop-in basis. So we post when tutors are available, and students come by with questions that they have. For courses that are not as high in demand, like our business and liberal arts courses, those are by appointment. And our music courses, so students need to schedule those in advance before coming to our center.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to reiterate one point that was made by our librarian here, which is that students, when they come into the university, are usually not very familiar with academic writing. And Kuihara et al. Is a research group that basically they study what goes on in high schools all across the country every 4 years to see what types of writing students are doing. And fewer than 50% of our students have ever written a researched piece of writing. And so if you can, most things are very short. They're either 5-paragraph themes or they're short answers of things. They may be a short 1-page or 2-page thing about a book. But generally speaking, they're not writing research pieces of writing. Towson takes very seriously, though, the teaching of writing, especially in our first year. We have 2 classes, English 102, which talks about the academic conversation and introducing students about how to integrate and look at sources and how to also kind of reflect on them and talk back, especially to research. And then TSEM is a research-based writing class. And so students do get quite a bit of practice their first year. Having said that, of course, 50% of our students are transfer students, and so sometimes they have a different background of writing skills. And so I guess what I mean to say here is that when students are writing in your classes, you have to remember that they may actually be pretty good writers. They may just not be very good writers at what you're asking them to do yet. And so being, kind of explicit in your guidelines. How the Writing Center can work with you is we work with faculty every day, all the time. Last year, I myself, I think, gave 80 presentations and workshops in different classes. My 2 assistant directors gave additional sometimes that's just coming to a class and just talking to students for 10 or 15 minutes about this is what we do, this is who we are, this is the services that we provide. Sometimes it's longer. It's something that, like for example, a faculty member wants students to understand something about the assignment. They want somebody else there to kind of talk through and add or kind of be able to support what they're kind of saying in class. What we do in the Writing Center, of course, is tutoring, not editing. And so this is a really important distinction, because what we're doing is we're working with your students to improve the writing skills, fill in some writing gaps. For a lot of students, for example, if they haven't done a lot of research writing, they don't mean to plagiarize, but they'll be doing something what we're talking about, which is called patch writing, which is that they'll paraphrase something, but they'll just drop in words for other words, things like that. And that's not cheating. That's not them saying, like, I want to steal words. It's them saying, or that's them practicing at trying to paraphrase better. And so what we'll do is we'll sit down and we'll work with them on that and do some practices with that. We focus on things, for example, we have a hierarchy. What's the student's purpose in this piece? Are they writing to an academic audience? And if there's something where we need to intervene, whether that's on the larger level or the smaller level, we use tools to do that. And so, for example, if it's organizational, we'll do a reverse outline to help the student basically reconstruct the material. If it's introducing sources or working on those, we'll talk about signal phrases and verbs and how you move between one's own research and what you want to say. If it is something that like tone or voice or things like that, we might go through the paper with a student and basically highlight the places where the tone is shifting and then talk about the patterns that we're seeing and go through and work on those. But the point is really here is that, we, after every appointment with a writing assistant, the paper is certainly better, but it's probably going to be better in 1 or 2 ways, hopefully the most important ways. But that does not mean that it's going to be a perfect paper, right? I mean, I've had meetings with students, for example, where I will have sat down with them for an hour, and what we'll have got done is basically the student now has a thesis statement that holds a paper together, whereas before it was basically a book report, right? And it took that time to basically get that focus so that and then we've talked about the introduction and conclusion, so the paper holds together as an academic paper. And so it really, you can, by the way, match students up with us. I get phone calls sometimes from faculty who have a student in their office and they're like, hey, listen, I just wanted to reach out. I have so-and-so here in my office. I'm wondering, if you would have somebody who might be a good match. Then we actually just get them on the schedule right then and there. Every time I visit a class, I notice that we get some students from that section into the Writing Center. And 70% of students who use the Writing Center the first time mark that they use it once a month after that. So that's how I judge success. I mean, we do a lot of assessment and things like that, but the return clients, the coming back, we always hope that there's a takeaway, basically, that students learn something they didn't know before, as well as getting a better paper. For some students, they do really just need that extra set of eyes, but for other students, they need something more intensive. And sometimes we'll sit down with a student 3 or 4 times on a single piece of writing. And so if you've got a student who you're particularly concerned about, something like that, give us a call, send me an email. I'm always happy to reach out to students or reach out to students with you. It's not a punitive service, so it's my staff are very friendly people. They're also very well trained. They are also graduate students and undergraduate students. We recruit them through you. But they are, last year, for example, I had 130 faculty recommended students, undergraduate and graduate students. We read samples and we kind of do those sorts of things. Then we do 90-minute long interviews for people who we think that their writing is good. We actually have them read papers and give feedback live. We hired out of that group, we only hired 25. and those are the faculty recommended people. I mean, so it's a pretty core group of very good readers and writers. And our training process is pretty intense. You know, there's about a 20-hour initial training, and then we have a 1-hour professional development each week where we talk about different things. We are also highly interdisciplinary. So if you have a student who's in health, I have right now, for example, about 5 or 6 students who are in health. My staff is big and it's very diverse and it's very broad. And so, you know, if you're teaching art, we have got a graduate student right now who's a professional children's book illustrator who's an amazing tutor as well. So, you know, it really, last year we had 2 Fulbright alternates come from the Writing Center. We've had a Rhodes Scholar alternate come from the Writing Center. We've had other Fulbrights come from the Writing Center. It's, you know, they're good folks. And if you want to talk with them as well, for sure. But when you see that outstanding student, just like with Liz, you know, pick up your email and send a message.
Thanks, Wayne. So the ISSO, because of course International Student and Scholar Office is a mouthful, the ISSO currently serves close to 400 students and an additional 150 post-degree students who are in training throughout their career here. And starting from, I would say, perhaps a year or so before they actually arrive, and up to 3 years after they complete their degree for those in the STEM field, we have multiple touch points along the way in keeping both the student and the institution in compliance with Department of Homeland Security regulations. Those responsibilities fall both on the institution and the student, and as such, there are consequences for non-compliance for both the student and the institution. So as you can imagine, it's always critical for us to ensure that students both understand and remain in compliance with those regulations. And we do a fair job of also trying to educate the faculty and staff at the institution to help us with that venture, right? We want you to understand what the students' requirements are in the classroom. We want them to understand what they are both inside and outside the classroom as well, because then it makes our job a little easier. We report a certain number of information, a fair amount of information every semester on the student. But before we get to that point, it's a lot of checking and rechecking, running reports to make sure they are enrolled fully, and so forth. During the year, however, once the student is settled into class, we often will receive calls from you, from your colleagues, if you're able to identify critical issues that a student might be facing. A lot of those issues are the same that Wayne or Liz identified for you. Just problems adjusting to an American style of teaching and learning, an American classroom for many of them. Though we have a fair amount of transfer students who have been in the US already, a fair amount of them are brand new students, whether it's at the English Language Center, undergraduate or graduate levels. And it takes some time for them to adjust, to get used to an American style, to understand issues around plagiarism, to understand what exactly is necessary in an American classroom. So we always encourage you and invite you, if you are able to identify problems early, please contact us. Sometimes you're not aware of all the resources that are available, and we can help point the student to what is there. We are also able to work more creatively with you at times in finding solutions for a student who perhaps, one common one might be the class isn't offered this semester, but the student needs it to graduate and cannot be here an additional semester, or other issues connected to their immigration status. So we encourage you to communicate early and often with us. That would be very helpful. We also work with non-immigrant faculty a lot, and I see some faces who I've seen over the past year in the room. I look forward to continuing working with you. For those faculty, I also encourage you to reach out to me early as you consider long-term plans in terms of immigration for yourself and perhaps your dependents. So please reach out to me very soon. And lastly, we work to assist those faculty who oftentimes will invite colleagues from abroad to perhaps come to Towson and do some research with you, some collaborative research. And if that's the case, we are happy to speak with you. This is assuming, of course, that you have already identified those people or they have reached out to you. Sometimes people will reach out to us blindly looking for someone to contact, to collaborate with, and we will contact you at times if we think there might be a match or your research reflects something they're interested in. But again, we're here to work with you in servicing those students and helping to understand what their needs are. Again, if there's one thing you should remember is that the student has immigration responsibilities above and beyond the average student in your classroom. So there's always things for them to be concerned about that may prevent them responding or acting in the exact same way that a domestic student might. So if you can remember that and always refer them to us if there's a question, we would be very grateful. It's easier to prevent an issue than try to fix it afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Does anyone have a question for any panelist at this time? Yes.
Few questions related to our teaching. One is the Tutoring Center. I heard the writing. And you should have the other subject, right? Is it centralized or the kind of spread out to each college? This is one question. Second is attendance. Is a university has a centralized policy or pretty much decided by the instructor, right? From the one school, we had in my view, a little bit odd policy. You cannot use attendance to punish students. In other words, in extreme case, he or she didn't come to the class at all, right? But doing the test very well, you should give him or her A, all right? That's a very extreme case, but that's what it is. Second, the third, oh, wow, just forgot. Okay.
Let me answer the attendance question by saying this. The best person to talk to about any policies like that, academic policies, would be your department chair. Because that way, if there is anything that is particular to your department, you won't be getting different messages from different people. So I would always refer you back there. But about the first question, would you like to answer?
Yeah, so writing tutoring is primarily centralized. I think that the School of Business has a small writing center inside of it. Health professions actually used to have a writing center as well, which I actually quite like working with other writing centers too. I'm very involved with the community writing centers and around here and such. But what we try to do is we try to be very, very interdisciplinary. And so I'll just say, for example, I think right now on my staff, I have more biology people than I do English majors. There are amazing writers from every academic discipline on campus. Some of those people are, they want to be doctors, and they're amazing writers too. So what we try to do is we try to actually, when a student signs up for a meeting, we try to basically match them up with somebody in their disciplinary family, and what they're working, because writing varies so much from discipline to discipline. In business, you have different genres. You've got case studies and things like that. Or in sciences, you have lab reports and you have other forms of writing that, you don't have in other places. In addition, writing with APA is very different than, say, Chicago style, right? Or how you incorporate research or the voice that you use. And so it's very important that we match the student up with somebody who can be a mentor in that area or around that area. It's also actually really important that they know some content that's related to it. Because, one of the big things that we work with oftentimes is that students come into the university they come in with a background in argument. And they're being taught all these short argumentative papers, like this should happen or this should not happen or things like that. They're not being taught how to analyze or how to understand a subject. They don't realize that everybody in this room, our purpose is trying to understand your discipline better. And almost every paper, almost every thesis that you're kind of writing, everything that you're saying is, here's a better way to understand how this works, right? And that the most important thing in writing is that they do this type of thinking analysis by looking closely and observing the evidence and thinking from multiple perspectives, trying to shoot holes, doing all the things that we do. They have to kind of learn those things. And that varies slightly from field to field, as you might imagine. Like how people go about that is different in art than it is, say, in biology or chemistry. And so having those people who are, say, a senior or a first or second year graduate student, sitting down and working with them and talking about something very basic, something like, well, we can't say always here. This proves. Doesn't really. Let's talk about what proving would actually mean. And it's a lot of times it's not just about the language. A lot of times it's about the purpose or the idea or the philosophy that goes behind the writing. And so it's an approach. That's why we're very, very careful to have a staff that's very interdisciplinary. They have a broad range of training that we do, and we try to kind of overlap so people understand other fields writing in different genres. But it is the purpose really is for your student in, say, if they're writing something in, let's say, computer science, that I have 2 people in computer science who are excellent writers. And they would be happy to sit down with that student and basically work through. And they'll better understand the prompt, of course, too. There's a lot of...
So for the actual Tutoring and Learning Center, which is course-specific support, we are limited in our space in the library. We have some centralized staff offices, and we have 5 cubicles and 1 classroom space for workshops and group sessions. So we have satellite locations in those other areas that I mentioned, math and science. Science is in the new science complex. Math and computer science are in the York Road building. Music is in Center for the Arts. Those tutors go through our tutor training program. So we're certified through the College Reading and Learning Association, and tutors can advance in certification through attending training and also gaining experience in working with students. It's always one of my greatest pleasures when I have a tutor who graduates with the idea that I'd like to teach someday. So it's really neat to be able to manage that, but also students who are looking to achieve their academic goals and learns how to manage their time. Talking about what you can do to help students and support them. Many times they're not sure how to utilize unstructured time. I do also oftentimes when students get a first grade back and I'm working with someone in academic coaching, break down what does studying look like for them. And what I hear often is, well, we wait to study until we have the study guide. And they're used to having a study guide, and some professors will provide that. So, encouraging them from the beginning. We've covered chapter 1. If I were to give you a test today, what would you prioritize in those subject areas? How would you know that you understood it? So getting them to think through it more analytically, more critically in the content areas as they're studying. And getting back to the transfer student adjustment period. If you're teaching an upper level course and you have transferring students in it, they often have an expectation that they've got this. They've been successful someplace else. And so they may not ask something that students who've been here longer already have that critical knowledge of where's the writing center? What resources does the library have? So anything that you can do to kind of scaffold that in your conversations about what your requirements are would help that population of transferring students as well. Did that answer your question about satellite locations?
Yes.
We have time for a couple more questions.
If I may.
Yes.
I can speak from here.
Sure.
Maybe it's for the next panel, but I thought, what is our advising system? You know, do we have like a professional advisor? Then you have a faculty advisor, and how we, as an instructor or the professor, cut into this picture. How, you know, especially for the students in trouble, how those three parts played out. I don't.
No, it's a good question because it's complicated. But Towson, I think, is pretty unique in the way we do things. So as I said, you know, if you're speaking about a student who is a freshman, they're going to have an advisor that is an FYE advisor that basically is hired through our department. And they will be working with them throughout the entire year. And so generally the way you can think about this is after freshman year, ideally the student will have an understanding of what they want their major to be. And so from that point, then we shift, they shift from an FYE advisor to a major specific advisor. And that could be an advisor that your department, I think for the most part, it's a faculty advisor. But that will be someone assigned by your department. So obviously you'd want to talk to your chair about who is going to be advising and that kind of thing. Every department's a little different. But they will be paired, every student, regardless of whether or not they're a freshman or all the way up to seniors, they have a one-on-one advisor throughout the entire time they're here. There's been some fluctuations with how we are approaching academic advising holds, but my understanding is that for the future, every student will be required to meet with their advisor. And that is addressed by the academic advising hold. So on a student's account, they have a hold that restricts them from next semester's registration until they meet with an advisor. Now that's not instated quite yet, but I think that's the plan for the future. Once a student reaches 45 credits, it's actually mandated by the state of Maryland that students complete a degree completion plan. And essentially what that is from this point on, all the way up to graduation, we're creating a plan that maps out every single class you would need to take to graduate. And that obviously changes. Students change majors, students fail classes or sometimes need to retake. But it gives the student a good structure. And so I guess, if you are assigned as, let's say your department assigns you as an advisor for the coming semester or year or so, you can expect that a student will be meeting with you to kind of go over every semester's class selections. Like I said, it's hard for me to talk about, I guess, what every single department does because every department, like I said, is different. But like I said, the one thing every department is expected to do is complete degree completions plans with their students. And generally, they will meet with their advisees who are in their major to then work with them on next semester's course selections and then remove that academic advising hold. So I think that's probably, I think the most common thing amongst all departments, but then every department kind of has their own way of handling their students as well. So I hope that answered your question. I think I got a little vague at the end there, but.
I think another part of your question was also how does the individual faculty member engage with the academic advisor within the department? And that is going to vary also a little bit department to department. So be sure to talk to your department chair as you do your orientation meetings over there. There is really a relationship there that's very important, and that will be different in your own department. So just be sure you follow up on that. and then we'll be able to keep the students right on track.
And sorry to interrupt. One more thing. There are some colleges that actually have college advisors. So, for example, Fisher College of Science and Math has a college advisor specific to those science majors.
Business does too.
Business does as well, but business is interesting because business has a very robust academic advising center within its own college. So they really run their own ship, and it's very efficient. But College of Health Professions has a person who is there as their college advisor. Not every college does, but there's a lot of different models for from college to college with this.
Yes, of course.
Sorry. One thing that I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Wayne and Liz had said is working with student athletes, I see a lot of syllabi. And there is another resource on campus for if you have speeches that you're going to require the students to, do a presentation or a speech or something in your courses. The PCC, the Public Communication Center on campus, is kind of spearheaded by the Communications Department or Department of Communications, and it's kind of like what they offer is tutoring for speeches. So whether that's outlining or finding sources or, just kind of the presentation aspect of it and delivery, things like that. So that is another resource that I've seen a lot during, syllabi review. Some professors just list it as a resource. Some professors actually require it as something as part of the assignment. Like in order for you to get full credit, you have to go to the PCC, and get assistance before the presentation or whatnot. The other thing that I wanted to kind of do a shameless plug for is our faculty and staff affinity groups on campus. So I actually am a member of the Women's Faculty and Staff Association on campus, but we have a variety of different affinity groups. So we have Jewish, Asian, Black, Latinx, LGBTQ+, and I feel like I left out an initial, and Asian. There might be another one that I'm missing, but there is a variety of different resources for you guys as faculty, and just kind of being able to communicate with other faculty that have been on campus or meeting new, other faculty members. That's kind of an outlet for you to be able to kind of connect with people.
Great.
I'm going to add one more thing. Faculty office hours. We're always encouraging students to communicate with faculty, but if you could give them an example of why students would come to office hours, it kind of breaks down that barrier for them. Some students come to Towson from high school assuming that if you go to office hours, it's because you're in trouble, or only for situations that are negative. So just as you're talking about your syllabus and requirements for the classes, if you could just unpack that a little bit with the students, I think that they would also find that valuable. We're always promoting that. I know when I taught as an adjunct faculty member, it was always disappointing when the students didn't come. And so as you're starting off your class, that's something that you could try to incorporate.
Okay, let's wrap up our panel by thanking our panelists for joining us. And I encourage all of you to follow up with any of the panelists. If you'd like to have anyone come do a class visit with you, the names of all the panelists are on your agenda, so you could email each of them, whoever you'd like to meet with, to come meet with your class, have a pre-meeting with this person or another person from the center or office represented here, and really bring these resources out to your students in addition to providing the support that you may need. So thank you very much for being with us today.